we're gone.
Okay. Good afternoon. Today we're honored to be here with the Reverend William Hankel, and he's here to tell us a little bit about his experiences with all three libraries. So we love that perspective. Good afternoon, Reverend. Would you please provide us with a background of yourself a little bit and the town of Secaucus?
Yes, I have very deep roots in this town. My grandmother was a Zangle, a name that is quite old in this community. And my grandfather was the only one of my four grandparents who was actually born in Germany and came here when he was 16 years old by himself. And his first job in New York City was to go door to door peddling milk. And I didn't appreciate what that meant, but it meant that he got to climb the stairs up to the tenements where the lady of the house had called down and said, bring some milk up. It saved her a trip up and down, and for that he got the few pennies over and above the cost of the milk. And that's how he started out, and somehow became acquainted with the Zangle family. And I think that's because they had some roots when my grandmother was a child in Yorkville, a section of New York City, which is a German section. She was born in this town, but when she was to be baptized, she was brought back to New York City for the baptism. So yeah, there are some deep roots. I was looking through some of my many collections of what my wife might call junk, but a treasure to me, and I came across the formal opening of the second library. And I'm interested to see that when it opened, there was an Adam Zangle serving on the town council, so he would have been a relative. How distant, I don't know. And on the board of trustees, Mrs. Robert Hankel, who was my aunt. Her husband is the editor of the Secaucus Home News. She's the mother of the current editor, so she was on the board. So that's some of the connections, family connections I have with the Secaucus Library.
Well, that's good. I mean, I do see where Mrs. Hankel served on the board. Ironically, her story is very cute, that her husband was at a library board meeting and said, why don't you appoint my wife? Unbeknownst to her, and that night they named her the secretary. So I don't know what happened to him when he went home and gave her the news, but she did a fabulous job.
Well,
just so you know.
It sounds like something Uncle Bob would do.
Yes.
And Aunt Joanne had a lovely handwriting, as I remember, so a good choice.
Beautiful handwriting.
Beautiful.
In fact, I loved reading those particular minutes because they're so legible. I happen to know that you're a very descriptive person who adores libraries, and I'd like you to take us on a tour when you visited the first library on top of the old town hall, and let us get a feel of what it was like from your perspective.
Well, it was an uphill journey. We lived at the bottom of First Avenue, and so there was a grade going up First Avenue, and then over to Patterson Plank Road, and another grade going up toward the town hall. And then when you got there were outside steps, and then very heavy doors, as I remember. They seemed very heavy, at least when I was that age, probably around 8 years old. Opened those, and then you would go up a very wide staircase, which when you got to the second floor level became much smaller and narrower, and wound around until finally you emerged into this, what I would call an attic, and I think that's what it was, in fact, an attic of this building. Attics have charms for kids, I think. I remember when I was growing up that we had an attic, and my friends used to love to come over and play in the attic, away from the supervision and watchful eye of our parents. We would play board games or whatever up in the attic, and it was a great place to be. Well, the library was an attic, and it had a fascination, I think, to me, especially as a child, that this was a place of adventure, a place of growing up. The library card was really a rite of passage into a more adult life, and I remember treasuring that card that I was given. that said all that. There was responsibility, and there was privilege, and there was mystery up there in the attic. Books to be explored, stories to read, and a great place to be. Just going through there into the library, there was Mrs. Dudley sitting behind her desk. That was the first encounter you had with another person in the library. She was a very pleasant woman, helpful, but at the same time no nonsense. I don't think you would make a whole lot of noise up there and get away with it. To me, she was very ancient at that point in time. She probably wasn't all that old, but she seemed very old to me. So the question kind of was, how did she get up here? It seems like it must have been a very difficult thing for her to get up and down all those stairs. But there she was, and she did her job quite well. The place was lined with bookcases, and because it was an attic, there were dormers, and there were all these things to work around to install these bookcases. But they did their very best to get as many books into that area as I think they could. And when I think about the library, I'm sure I was up there sometimes when it was raining, because I can sort of hear the pitter-patter of rain. I don't think there was a lot of insulation in that attic. You could hear the rain. I'm sure it was very cold in the winter and hot in the summer for Mrs. Dudley, but I never heard her complain about that. So, it was a place of mystery and delight and of growing up. A fun place to be.
And how old were you then when you left? You told me that you left for a period of time to go to school.
Well, I left for college when I was 18. By that time, the new library would have opened. I don't remember spending a great deal of time in it at that stage in my life. I guess I had access to the high school library and used that a lot for projects at school. I just don't have a lot of recollection. I have a crazy recollection, though, and that is that when the library was first built, before there was a Buckmullet Park, the land had been filled in, and we had a circus behind the library. I remember that especially because a monkey escaped from the circus, and we believed that he was in the trees on First Avenue. We saw him whether or not he was really there or not. And we would point up in the trees, and the neighbors would come out to see if they could also see the monkey. So it was a great deal of fun and an adventure to have a circus that close to your house. At the bottom of First Avenue, I can look, and always could, right out my window and see the library at all times.
Oh, that's a wonderful asset.
Yeah,
I wish I had that.
It was a neighbor.
It was a neighbor. That's a lovely way to put it. Thank you. It sounds like you were writing a children's fiction there with the monkey in the tree. I could see that one on the bookshelf. But when it comes to the library on Patterson Plank Road, you're a very, very active pastor and work with many organizations in need. And when the Friends of the Library was established, we decided to have a fair similar to the Women's Club mini fairs, and we went out and we asked all the organizations in town to come and take tables. And I think one of the first tables booked was you and your wife Lorna, where you brought church pamphlets and information to give out. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? What makes the first year in the park so interesting? Because later on we move on and you become much bigger involved, much larger in the activities that you did for the mini fair.
Well, I just love things that draw community together in a healthy way, and that's what the mini fair has always represented to me. It's a great day to see friends and acquaintances that, even in this small town, sometimes they escape you over the period of a year. You don't see them, but it's kind of, I'm going to see a lot of people at the mini fair. It's a great time to visit with people. And so I thought this is the church, a place that the church should be, to say we're your neighbor too, and we support you and we need your support, and we should be there. And so from day one, we wanted to be there. And as you know, we early on went out to some of the farm stands out in the western part of the state and bought produce. That became less of a gift to the community when the farmers market came to see Caucus as the green market in the plaza, and also having a farmers market from week to week in the community. But we've continued to be there in whatever way we can to say, here we are, and we're your neighbor, and we want to chat with you. And we do get to visit with a lot of people. It's wonderful.
It was wonderful to have you because you were one of the first churches, and you set the standard, and then we started to have others join us. And oh my goodness, if Pastor Henkel is there, the Catholic Church better get themselves there. So you really did help support, and I know you do that in so many ventures.
Well,
you're well
you
known.
know, I, along with other community members, I grieve the loss of the Acme and the loss of the Plaza Diner, even to this day. But the Mini Fair is a little bit of an antidote to all that. It's, you know, it's a place that we do some of that kind of visiting that we did in those places. So I treasure it.
That's great. And when you did the farm, unbeknownst to you, we called it Henkel's Farm. And when we set up the schematic of where the different vendors should be located, because each year you got a little bit bigger and plants were added, but it was lovingly referred to as Henkel's Farm spot.
But for the record, we have to say that the Henkel Farm that existed on County Avenue was a pig farm.
Okay.
And that the Henkel family is part of that whole pig industry which existed just till about the time that the new library was opened in the plaza. 1957 was when the last farm left the community. So
in 1957, the library opened, so that was a big date in this town.
Yes.
Since we spoke a little bit about this new facility here on Patterson Plank Road, what has been your experience here, and can you share any predictions of what you think the library will be like in the future?
Okay, I'm going to back up just a little.
Go right ahead.
Because there's some things I'd like to say about library number 2.
Okay.
That I didn't share. When we came back to the community, we had a 1-year-old, and the boys were in 6th grade and 9th grade. So the library became useful to us and very convenient for these 2 different age groups. But of course, I didn't have to accompany the older boys to the library, but I did take Sarah there. So as I've mentioned before, I spent a lot of time in the children's room in the library, and I used it also not only to introduce Sarah to books and choose books, but also because I would pick up books there for children's sermons to read to the children in our worship service when we did children's sermons. So a lot of people probably wondered, because very often I was there without a child, pouring through the children's books down in the basement of that library. So I went from the attic to the basement, so to speak. I guess the most exciting thing for me about that library is when we went into the buckle system and opened up many, many new horizons, I thought, in the accessibility of books that weren't always immediately available there. So that was a big moment. I found that library less cozy by far than that attic from which we came. And I'm happy now that we're in this place, because I think some of that coziness has come back in this building. And so I treasure it. It's got its reading room where I see people just relaxing and being there in a way that we couldn't in library number 2 in the same way. And it's just very exciting to me. And the business aspect is also very exciting. But I think what's most exciting to me, and I hope that continue to do in the future, is that it's become kind of a cultural resource center too. And I really appreciate the shows that have been held in the Panasonic room and the live events of having performers there. And my brother is doing a program now at the 92nd Street Y called Movement Talks. It's about talks related to dance, from which field he comes. And his very first event was held here in the Panasonic Group, and it launched this whole program now over New York City. So I think,
wonderful.
wow, what a great thing. And I think Sea Caucus needs culture, and I think this is one place where it's really getting expressed. Some of the talent of the town, as well as people from outside the community. I think it's a wonderful thing. And also, I've had occasion to use the display in the entryway display to share the history of our church as it celebrated its 125th anniversary, and also a trip around the world that my mother took to visit her newborn grandson in Vietnam during the height of the war. So those are two opportunities I've had, and so many other people have had wonderful opportunities to share from their lives and their collections in that display. So what a wonderful thing. So beyond the books, which I think have improved with the increased space, and the addition of CDs and DVDs and all that stuff, keeping up with the time we live in, is those aspects of cultural events and sharing community. What a great place.
So we hope this will continue. Is that your prediction?
I
you want to
certainly
see
hope.
more and more of that
yeah.
going on in this
Yeah,
town?
I think it's a service that the library has to provide, which I can't see coming from any other direction in quite the same way. So what a good thing.
That's really very wonderful. You can see your love of libraries, your love of the community, and of course your love of the church, all just sitting and listening to you. So we're very pleased that you shared a little bit of that with us today. Is there anything else that you want to add to make us feel part of your story here?
Let me check if there's anything on here. I just wrote that, just that I'm sitting here in this nook is precious to me. That this space has been designed to have, like an attic, a little getaway space for people. So we're partway back to the charm that I knew as a child. And I'm glad to see the attention that's paid to children in this building too, and the reading space outside as well as inside. Great thing. And there is a woman on the staff of this library who has the Zangel last name also, so I'm still kind of attached via relatives to this building and to the library.
That's absolutely true.
Yes.
You are entwined with us here, so we don't ever want to lose you.
Well.
So we'll continue to please you as much as we can.
Oh.
But I appreciate your time and giving us this little insight into the history as you saw it, and hopefully others can feel that love of that little old library up on the top of the town hall. Neither the library nor the town hall are there any longer, but you made it alive for us today.
A wonderful memory that I carry with me. Thank you for the opportunity to share it with you.
Thank you, Pastor.